Let's do it.
All right, gents. Well, thanks for joining me today. I'm interested in this topic and talking with you guys. And I know a lot of other people are as well, because once you go down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, it consumes your attention, and that's all you want to do. And all the better if you can make your fiat mining, or even your, whatever your income, however your income is denominated, Bitcoin or fiat, you want to be earning it by engaging in Bitcoin in some capacity, i.e. working for a Bitcoin company. So that seems to be what you guys are embarking upon, helping people do that. So why don't you both introduce yourselves, and when you can introduce the company, and then we can take it from there and see what you guys are doing.
Yeah, happy to. And thanks again, John, for having us here. What you just said, I think, is the perfect way to kick it off. All of us, I think everyone who's listening to this right now has probably had this epiphany, this kind of turning point in their lives, where you've been operating in your fiat world, your fiat job, your fiat life, right? But to the side of that, maybe a burgeoning obsession with Bitcoin has been growing and growing. And these two worlds, these two lives for a certain period of time, different for everyone, right, do kind of run in parallel until you just can't do that anymore. You have to mix business with pleasure, so to speak. You have to join those two. And so that is my story, certainly, in the story of Bitcoin Talent Co. My background, I've for 12 plus years now, I've been in the recruiting landscape, specifically in like the tech world, right? So I've been working, for better or worse, here in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, working at large tech companies, working at agencies, again, all focused on recruiting, right? Which, at least in the world I come from, is a big lever for growth for venture-backed companies. For the past 3 years, I've actually been already running a recruiting agency, right? And again, this was focused on the traditional world, if you will, my fiat life, supporting the hiring needs of early to mid-stage startups, across the country, actually, at this point. I, over the past 3 years, was also diving deeper and deeper down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. And as we just said, got to the point where I couldn't have these worlds be separate. And it seems so obvious now. Obviously, it seems like it was a very easy decision, but there was a period of a couple months where I was just thinking to myself, how can I make that jump? How can I spend more time in this space? How can I support this space, right? And well, again, obvious light bulb went off, where I'd already spent a couple of years building a business, a product, if you will, a service that could prove quite valuable in the Bitcoin landscape. Thinking of repurposing, reorienting the existing kind of recruiting infrastructure I'd built, and now dedicating that specifically to Bitcoin companies, Bitcoin-only companies, helping them to hire, helping to bring more people into the space, right? And so this was towards the end of last year, where this was all starting to kind of come together in my head. I wanted to start this in the right way and have the right kind of team together from the get-go. And so that's where I looked to Twitter, as most of us Bitcoiners do as well. So who do I know in the space? Who I think would be a great partner in this endeavor? Eric, to your credit, you'd been for quite some time really active, posting great content. Again, just someone that I wanted to know first and foremost, but secondly, I think someone that would really be a great partner in this endeavor. So reached out to Eric, said yes right away. Thought it was a great idea. We got to work. Reached out to a third co-founder of ours, Michael Tanguma, who has been an operator in the space for quite some time as well. And I thought the three of us, with our collective backgrounds, mine in the recruiting landscape, but then Eric and Michael respectively with their kind of deeper Bitcoin expertise, at least operating in the space, that we could really kick this off in the right way. And all kind of came together in January. 2 months later, we're off and running. We had our public launch just 2 weeks ago, but we've already been supporting companies and successfully bringing value to the space, which has been great to see it come together so quickly.
Awesome.
Yeah, I guess I'll jump in real quick here. So before Bitcoin, I was working as a civil engineer post university, and Bitcoin just been on my mind nonstop. So I'm checking the price every day. I'm going down the rabbit hole, and then eventually I'm like, I just need to work in this space. I was just not passionate at all about engineering, and when I came home from my job, that's all I was doing is researching Bitcoin. So it was kind of obvious to me, okay, I need to make a career change here. Didn't exactly know how to do that. So I kind of just dove into it. I started a small Bitcoin education company, and the whole goal was just kind of teach other people about Bitcoin and also refine my knowledge about Bitcoin at the same time. Because if you could teach it, it means you really understand it. So that was back early 2021. And then I decided to quit my engineering job because I was having so much fun in the Bitcoin space. I decided to go all in, really. So slightly after that, I got a job with Bitcoin Magazine. I was there from late 2021 up until recently, up until basically Andy reached out to me. I was handling sales and accounts there. And then made the transition to Bitcoin Talent Co. Was like, this makes so much sense to me that the Bitcoin industry is maturing, and now we need to help the industry mature. And how do we do that? It's by bringing in the best talent outside the industry to work for these Bitcoin companies, and at the same time help Bitcoiners get jobs in the Bitcoin space. So that's basically our whole thesis here. And yeah, we're happy to be like, I guess, a month or less into officially launching, and things are going great.
So tell me what the last month has been like. You've launched, you've done a little press or podcast tour, and in the Bitcoin space, if it's quality, product or service that's being launched by what's the right word to use? Legit or good or honest, people, word typically travels pretty quickly because it's still, a relatively small space, at least as far as, Twitter and Nostr and those sort of places are concerned. So what's it been like the last month? Like expectations met, not met, unexpected things to emerge, excitement, problems? Yeah. Just hit me with what it's been like. I know it's only been a month, but
yeah, lots to unpack. I mean, all those different sub questions within that, but the overall theme is just incredible. I mean, incredible. Past couple of weeks, the reception has been super positive. We've been really encouraged, really excited by the messages we've received. Everything. So top to bottom, just couldn't have asked for more. Some of the things, like some of the standouts, I guess, if you will. So, I mean, again, just over 2 weeks since the official launch, since launching the website, since having like the opportunity for people to submit their interest in finding a Bitcoin job, that kind of thing. We have had hundreds, probably approaching 1,000 applications at this point. So maybe a quick disclaimer, I would say, if you have visited our website, if you have submitted an application, we are receiving it, we are seeing it, we are doing our best to get through those. Obviously, we would love to match all of you with a job immediately, but I think we need to say that's, unfortunately, that wouldn't be the case right now, but we are responding to those, we are going through those, and we just appreciate everyone's interest so much. I don't want to say that I'm surprised by that interest, but again, just the sheer volume, sheer quantity has been really exciting, really encouraging to see. Another thing I'll say too, and again, maybe not a surprise, but a suspicion we had that has been confirmed is this, like, now that we've put this flag up, all the other people who we have known for years, but didn't know to be Bitcoiners, they're kind of coming out of the woodwork. And so this is something that I think I was hoping to be true, right? And really excited, because the big thesis we have is like, we need more and more people to come into the space to continue to help build these companies, to bring the right kinds of transformational products and service to reach that step change, to have those inflection points, to just increase adoption, right? And to build those companies with just the people who are on Bitcoin Twitter today or working in the space today, like it's not going to be enough. We need more and more people to come into the space to grow the space. Yeah, naturally, right? And so to again see people that I would have no idea were Bitcoiners previously saying, "Hey, I actually am interested. And now that I know you're doing this, like, how can I get involved? How can I work for a Bitcoin company?" I mean, it's so exciting to see that happening. And then on the company side too, I mean, obviously a big part of what we are doing, and the main focus, I should say, is working with organizations, working with companies to help them to hire the right talent, help them to work through their open requisitions, that kind of thing. And so obviously for this business to succeed, there needs to be sufficient companies and roles within those companies to make hires, right? And we are seeing growth there. We're seeing a lot of inbound interest. We're seeing people who with whom our message resonates. Obviously, if someone is at a Bitcoin company looking to hire, naturally they're going to want to work with a firm that is focused only on the Bitcoin landscape. And so we're proud, we're excited to see that our message, even in our branding, right, Bitcoin Talent Co., like that's resonating with companies who ultimately do want to bring on the support.
Yeah, to piggyback off of that too, I would say for me, the most shocking, exciting thing would be the amount of NIMs there are on Twitter with like 20, 30 followers that are actually like such talented, so qualified, such talented operators outside the Bitcoin industry and their fiat jobs. And now that our service exists, they're coming out and saying, "Hey, can you help me get a job in the space?" So just thinking about all of the talent that's coming into the Bitcoin space, all that human capital, it's been shocking to me, and I'm so excited to get it like off the ground and running.
Yeah. Am I right in assuming that there's a lot more interest in people looking for a job than there are jobs available, particularly in this industry right now?
Yes. Short answer is yes. And I'll say across the board. I mean, again,
that's always the case.
Always the case. Well, yeah, I mean, always the case, but even more so the case right now. in Bitcoin, yes, because we're in a bear, right? We're still kind of at a bottom of a cycle, right? But broadly, macroeconomically speaking, I mean, we're all in a bear. Every industry is kind of in a bear market right now. So I'm seeing that pain across the board. It's not that it's Bitcoin only. It's, I mean, goodness, how many large tech layoffs have we seen over the past 18 to 24 months now? So yeah, the pendulum that is ever shifting between being a candidate market and a company market, like it's definitely in the favor of companies right now because there are less jobs and more candidates for those jobs, vying for those jobs. But we see that as, interestingly enough, kind of I use it to our favor, I guess, is the best way to put it right now, because we know things will come back. We know, other industries will bounce back, but obviously Bitcoin specifically is only going to continue to grow, right? And while we're somewhat beholden to these, 4-year cycles we've seen over the past few, cycles, I see that hopefully smoothing out. I see more capital coming into the space that kind of allows companies themselves to be somewhat immune to those cycles. And so the long story short, Bitcoin companies are going to grow. They're going to be founded. They're going to need to hire. So to the extent that we can lay this foundation now, put that flag up so that candidates, first and foremost, know that we're here to help them. And then that companies, if and when the time comes for them to need this kind of external support, that we're here as well. So establishing our presence, establishing the brand, building some credibility, some trust in this bear market is, I think, the right time to do it, so that when things are just flying off the rails and everyone wants to get to the space, like we've already established ourselves.
Yeah, makes sense. And just a housekeeping note, I didn't mention it before we went live, but if I lose you, like if we get a power glitch here and it comes right back, usually it takes like a minute or two for the connection to reestablish. So just hang on and I'll be back. Our Bitcoin companies, I mean, I'm sure there are some positions being filled right now, but as you say, it's a Bitcoin bear market. It's a, edge of a recession macro wise, so I mean, our companies, are there a lot, what's the right way to put it? There's obviously not probably not a ton of positions available, but what kind of a mood is there in terms of companies looking for talent? I mean, you always need talent, you always have some positions to fill, but obviously less than when things are robust, like you were just saying. So what's the general mood there right now?
I think it's, and maybe a sentiment that should remain moving forward, is this like being as efficient as possible, more done with less, and not in a way that is sacrificing quality, right? But how can we be better with our capital? How can we be better with our hiring plans, right? Hiring one great person instead of 5 people who ultimately 80% of that would have to get laid off in a downturn, right? So we're seeing maybe just to say more thoughtful conversations around hiring. How do we make sure we're scaling in the right way? How are we building in the right way? This is obviously an area where we can hopefully lean in with teams, with companies, and be thought partners on that front. But yeah, I don't think that's a bad thing. Perhaps I think that's something that should persist. And just being thoughtful around how you use your capital, how you deploy your capital, and how you build your teams. Beyond that, I think it's we're seeing, I guess we could say we're seeing certain roles always be of importance. Technical roles, of course, we're gonna always have there's a requirement, right, for building that foundation from a technical standpoint for a lot of these products and services, if you will. So engineering teams, product teams, things like that are always an importance. Not to say that the more general corporate functions, but those are what you typically see as a company reaches a certain period of growth, right? And so I see when the bear market turns around, and again, more capital comes into space, these companies will be rounded out with sales teams, with finance, legal, HR, things like that. So that's just another point to make, that it's not always going to be technical needs in the Bitcoin landscape. Everyone, whatever your discipline is, will somehow, some way be able to find a transition into Bitcoin, I think, if you should choose.
And thinking about organizations, there's really 2 main buckets of how you place people within a company. There's executive level searches, and then there's more individual contributors. Right now, we're seeing more of exec level searches, I'd say, higher level, just because I think where we're at in the market, and a lot of these Bitcoin startups, they need leadership basically to build the foundation. And then after, I'd say, a year or so, then they start building out their teams and hiring all those individual contributors as well. So yeah, right now, I would say all the companies we're working with, and a lot of them that we're talking to, are looking for those upper level management. And that's what we're going out beyond the Bitcoin ecosystem to go find that talent. And then our hope is, and we expect this in the next coming months and year or so, the individual contributor roles will really start to spring up.
Right. What's the business model for, I'm not too familiar with recruiting. I had some friends that worked in it back in the day, and I thought it was something like you get a certain number of months of the salary, or, you know, what's the commission basically, or how does this business model work?
Yeah. I think to preface it too, I'll say this: it's like, not giving away the secret sauce, right? But we're not reinventing the wheel here. You know, the recruiting industry has existed. Recruiting as an external, you know, resources, like the vendor side of the fence, like that's existed for decades across all industries. It's been a valuable, you know, product for some time, you know. So we're not reinventing the wheel in that case. It is surprising though to see that I mean, please prove me if I'm wrong. I'm still looking for this, but like in terms of the real embedded recruiting advisory type services, we are the first recruiting firm focused solely on the Bitcoin landscape. And it blew my mind that was the case, but I knew we had a huge opportunity to jump in and really, you know, really grow quickly. But the model, yes, it's the revenue, if you will, comes from companies. You know, I have this like this deep philosophy. We have conversations internally around like, you know, revenue structures and things like that, but candidates should never pay. You know, you're looking for a job, we'll do what we can to help you, but you should never pay. The revenue comes from companies who are obviously looking to fill their roles. And generally the fee structure is, yes, it's a % of that hire's first year starting salary. You don't have to get too deep in the weeds. There's other ways that we can, you know, work on different types of terms with companies, more embedded, more like fixed fee models, that kind of thing. But in general, yes, you know, it's the revenue comes from a company looking to make a hire, and we charge based on what the need, what the level, what the nuance of the role is.
And is it a lucrative business?
It's a very low overhead business for sure.
Right.
You know, we don't have our own significant, you know, technology stacks, if you will, products and engineering, things like that, you know?
Yeah.
So it can be, right. And I think, let's just call it what it is. I think it's important to note that there can be an opportunity to have this be a significant driver of revenue. And so a lot of our thinking is, how can we then turn that revenue to other products and services for the space broadly, whether it's educational content, building out, and this will cost money. So it's, you know, taking what's making money and investing it in other areas that'll have a broader impact in terms of providing education for those looking to get into the space, you know, easy, accessible content. I mean, goodness, we can go all day about some of our like big, bold bets, but, you know, working with companies to build internship programs, like kind of extending the pipeline or opening up the pipeline at an earlier stage to folks who are coming out of college, right? How can they see Bitcoin as like the first industry they want to work in and not transition after going elsewhere, right? So there's all kinds of ways that we can reinvest, if you will, the revenue driving recruiting sole business to do a lot of other exciting stuff in the space.
Yeah. I'd like to talk about some of those ideas that you might have, but first, just what is it like, what's the value add other than, you know, kind of taking a load off of internal structure, but like, how do you guys, how are you better at vetting prospects? Like, how do you match people with a given role, and what attributes of the prospective job seekers or the job seekers are you looking for? And how do you, like, is there a system in place? Like, how do you really determine that a particular individual with a particular skill set, and maybe even ones that aren't quantified on a given resume, let's say, how do you match that with also, you know, when a company posts a job, they're probably not listing things that they would want, but they don't know that they want in a candidate. So how do you marry those two?
There's two main things I would say. And the first thing I'll start and say is actually, I would never say that I'm a better judge of, let's say, engineering talent than a CTO, right? So I'm not going to assume the very granular, fine detail assessment of like technical ability. And I know it sounds kind of controversial to say that statement because that's the service we provide, is bringing people in, but it's actually different, right? It's not me just saying like, you don't know what you're looking for, let me go do it for you. It's again, two things. So first and foremost, it's I think something can be said for like the efficiency gain through scale, right? We are talking to so many people across so many relevant roles and relevant industries, right? So over time, we have a pretty good bench that's built of candidates who could be a good fit, right? We see a world obviously where everyone who is expressing interest in Bitcoin talent comes to us, right? Or at least, we have some relationship with that person through our network, right? Every individual company probably can't say that. And it's nothing against the company, but it's just, there's a crowdsourced element of people coming to us for saying they want Bitcoin jobs. And then from there, we can connect them with the right talent. So there's, again, efficiency gain through that kind of like scale. The second piece is just the process, and the truth is, and I know this to be true by having spent my entire career in this space and helping teams to hire, helping to distill, to your point, like things that maybe aren't in the job description. So I can help to tease out and pull out actually what's going to be the right candidate. I'm not going to assess the engineer for an engineer, right? But I can help to understand a bit more around, what's going to go into the job description beyond the bullet points, right? And just the process management, this is kind of tied to that point, but the overall, process of building an efficient recruiting loop or interview loop, I should say. How are we, again, doing the intake to understand what's going to go into the role? How are we then building a research project is really what it is, a talent mapping effort to understand, okay, well, these are the right kinds of companies, these are the right kinds of job titles, individuals, et cetera, that go into the right candidate profile. Then the heavy lifting of recruiting, like really where the bread and butter is going to market, reaching out to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, not thousands of candidates over a search, right? To make sure that we're canvassing the market, looking for the right person and starting those conversations. So a huge heavy lifting of process management, moving candidates through the interview process, all the while collecting inbound and responsibly, looking at applications and putting those talented folks into the pipeline as well. So a lot of different pieces that go into like what a recruiter does on a day-to-day basis. And maybe I have this chip on my shoulder, maybe it's just the lens through which I view it, but I've come from environments where recruiting is an engine. Recruiting is a muscle that's required because, companies are just moving so fast. Companies are hiring at such scale where you need people to be focused on that. And so again, having the experience, having done this both internally in that kind of environment, as well as in an agency setting, both agencies I've worked at and agencies I've run myself, this has continued to be a proven value add.
And to piggyback on that too, I think it's important to note that Bitcoin's cyclical nature kind of makes a quick, I guess, on-ramp. Like a lot of Bitcoin companies act like startups, hire a bunch of people. And then what we saw in like 2021 to 2022, even into this year, these companies now have to lay people off. So that includes HR and recruiting type of employees as well. So if you think about what we can do, we can kind of, depending on where the market's at, we can help a company ramp up their recruiting or ramp down. And they don't have to take on the extra cost of hiring someone full-time, or after they hire them, there's not enough work for them just because the market takes a downturn. So the ability, I guess, to flex up and down is a very big value I think we provide. And it saves Bitcoin companies lots of money.
How do you let them scale down?
So this is the point that I was going to make. It answers that question too. And Eric, thank you for raising that, because it's like the first question for an internal team is, do I even need help in the first place? Right? Like, can I do this search myself? A hiring manager often will do that, and that's fine. They'll go through their own network as they should. They'll run this internally, and then they'll say, okay, yes, I need help. And then when you go to the second question, it's like, okay, well, do I need help internally or externally? Like, should we as a company build a recruiting function, or should we just go to external resources, external partners? Obviously, both have happened, over the past decades, and both have happened with success. But I think that what we're seeing now is these whipsaw kind of macro cycles we've gone through. I think cycles that typically take like 8 to 12 years to play out, we've seen 2 of those in the past 3 years, right? It's been wild. And through all of those, overhiring, layoffs. All right. So these companies are always behind the ball just in terms of making irresponsible decisions. Perhaps it's a whole other conversation, but trying to decide how to plan, how to do workforce planning responsibly for the future, right? And so to make that easier, let's just rely solely on external resources. And again, John, to your point, how do we flex up and down? Well, if a company raises a bunch of funding, they're going to hire a team of 100 engineers in 6 months. And I'll kind of just an example here. They could hire a recruiting team internally to handle that. But after they hire the 100 engineers, is that cadence going to continue? Is that load going to continue? Probably not, right? So what does that recruiting team now do internally? Do they have to lay them off? Hopefully not. Hopefully they don't go through that exercise because it's painful. With us, we can come in, we can help you manage this project for 6 months, however long it takes, a year, and then we part ways. It's not a sad thing to move on from an engagement or a relationship like that. We're happy that we've been able to provide that value to a company. And when they have that need again, then they'll hopefully come back because they enjoyed the service. But again, we are definitely able to flex up and down with a company's hiring needs, and that should be seen as a benefit, right? When using external resources versus building out your own team internally. Then you can go further down and say okay, we're also going to be saving you payroll costs. We're going to be saving you, benefits, equity, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of savings on that front for sure.
Yeah, I get the point of engaging you guys to be just more precise, let's say, with your spending, your allocation for this particular task. But what I mean is, in terms of flexing down, if layoffs have to occur, what's your guys' role there? Just that there's an existing relationship, the prospects go back in the talent pool, and you kind of try to place them again, and so that makes the process a little bit more smooth, or what else? What am I missing?
Yeah, so I guess to be clear, if the question is do we have any role during a layoff? Do we help clients, former clients, et cetera, in a layoff? No, we don't. Obviously we're focused on growth. We're focused on helping to hire talent. Selfishly speaking, of course, right? If candidates unfortunately are laid off, then yes, they can come back to us. And if we have other clients who are looking to hire, then we'd be happy to help those talented individuals to find a new home. Of course, we would do what we can on that front. But there's really no, and it's not because we don't choose to. It's just, it's a different service. Again, we're recruiting focused. When you talk about layoffs and other kind of issues, you're getting more into like human resources type services, and that's just a little bit outside the scope of what we typically would focus on.
How do you guys see biz dev in this industry in particular, or your company, particularly in the Bitcoin industry? Because I remember I lived in China for a decade, and I'd be getting hit up on LinkedIn and cold calls by the recruitment guys all the fucking time. And so, I mean, so obviously super competitive industry and all that kind of stuff. Now you're the first doing this in Bitcoin only land. So it probably means the sell can be, a little more easy, a little less intense, but presumably competition will bubble up at some point. And so how will biz dev and sales, because I'll preface this question by saying, I think, as we all know, there's fiat way of doing things and there's Bitcoin way of doing things. And I think most of us think and like the idea that in Bitcoin land, things happen a bit differently. Maybe not always super differently, but with a little bit of a different vibe and a different approach, and perhaps with different considerations and principles at the forefront, let's say.
Yeah.
And so at some point in the future, and potentially now, because I don't know your biz dev process right now, but I mean, how will you get those prospects and get those clients? Like what will the sales process be like in an industry that I think, I'm not too far out on a limb by saying values, honesty, integrity, and quality, and, all those things. And not that the hardcore sales don't embody them, but there's, I don't know, something about the hard pitch, I think in this industry, people are a bit sensitive to. So how do you guys see, doing biz dev now and into the future?
Yeah, I'll let Eric take most of this one, because I know it's a lot of what he's working on. But something I'll say quickly is just maybe setting the right tone up front. Yeah, so you talked about getting hit up in your career all the time by recruiters. This happens. I'm a recruiter who gets hit up by recruiters, right? We all see this, and I'm going to wager that most of us get pretty inappropriate or irrelevant or just really spammy type messages. So I'm a recruiter, but I'll admit the majority of the recruiting landscape is less than stellar, just to put it that way. And it feels salesy. So what I want to say right off the bat is, like, recruiting, at least again, and the type of recruiting I've done in the past, what we're trying to build here, like, it shouldn't feel salesy, right? It's more consultative. It's more like embedded, more advisory, right? Like, there's more relevancy. All of that, is important in terms of like our brand as it grows from this early stage, right? So it's never just throw resumes over a fence. It's never just reach out to, I put these numbers at hundreds, thousands of candidates, but we're not just reaching out to folks who have like one keyword in their LinkedIn profile or on Twitter, right? So it is more thoughtful, right, than that. So the recruiting itself should hopefully feel more value add than just like sales. Now, of course, I want that to translate in how we do business development, and factoring in what we've already seen to work, even in our 2 months of existence so far, as it relates to like being salesy versus just being like a trusted voice or a trusted partner in the space. I think we want to rely on the network that we've already been building out. And again, Eric, I know, has been jumping into that. Michael as well, our third co-founder. Like, we want to cultivate, the relationships we've already built and kind of like grow the web from there, if you will.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think it's important that people on the internet can see you're genuine and have integrity in the Bitcoin space as well. So I've been building, I guess you could say, my personal brand on Twitter for the past 6 months or so. So you can go back and look and see if I'm like a real Bitcoiner or not. Like, this is what I do every single day. I talk about it every single day. And so our mission really is to help the Bitcoin network grow. This is what I really care about. Like, this is like my whole life right now. And I think that mission that backs with my personality and my beliefs makes it genuine. So what I'm trying to get at really is building a brand. So building a brand and having people already, such as Andy, that have proven valuable success in the recruiting landscape. Plus, we also have a team of advisors as well that are very, very well known in this space. So, at least our organization, we're a group of Bitcoiners, really. So if you're a Bitcoin company, you say, I want to work with other Bitcoiners because they probably have the same values as I do. We're not trying to really make that quick sale and exit. We want to be here for the long term. That's that low time preference thinking, really. So as we put out more content, as we help more and more companies hire, I think that'll be really shown as we keep posting about it too online. So business development, yeah, it's less salesy, more building a brand. And from there, it's providing value. So Bitcoin's all about providing value and showing that proof of work. So along the journey, as we show our success, we hope that other companies in the space see our value and utilize it. So
this business has natural flywheels built into it. Recruiting in general, not even just the Bitcoin landscape, like referrals from previous clients we've worked with, candidates who are placed who now become clients hiring for their own roles. So these things naturally grow the business over time too. And low time preference thinking. I mean, it's a great way to put it, and using the ethos of the space too. It's like, to be clear, do we want to service and support every single Bitcoin company? Absolutely, to the extent we can, of course, yes. But do we want to rush that process and have a team of sales folks reach out to every company in the space today to do that? No, not necessarily. And I'll say it again clearly, I don't have any plans to hire a sales team. I don't think that makes sense. We have through our advisory network, through our founding team, to continue to cultivate that and grow the business responsibly and in the right way, and not rush it, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Good.
Well, that seems wise. And again, you're in such a small pool currently that as you say, the hardcore pitch isn't even necessary right now, because word travels so fast. And Eric, as you said, and I totally agree, obviously, that it's easy to there's less tolerance for fiat bullshit. Let's put it that way in Bitcoin space. And one of my questions would be, it would be great to see LinkedIn die and have all the bullshit on LinkedIn go with it. And you mentioned earlier that an anonymous pleb with 20 followers on Twitter, you're realizing how how capable they are and how credentialed they are, and how well suited they would be for some of these positions. What is because one of the tasks you have in front of you is prospecting, right? Like getting a prospect list and figuring that out. That comes even before the pitch, either to the prospect to the prospect rather than the company. And so how do you go about that in this space? Maybe it's irrelevant right now because you're getting so much inbound. But in the future, again, with an eye towards I think LinkedIn, at least in this industry, is probably not going to survive too long. Maybe that's my bias. Maybe it's my hope.
I hope you're right.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you see identifying prospects to, effectively go after in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I have many thoughts on this. I've lived on LinkedIn, sadly, my whole career. I just have had to, right? It's what I do every day. Looking at people, looking at profiles, I know how to use LinkedIn very well, but I hate that that's really the only tool. I mean, the monopoly they have in the talent landscape, my goodness, right?
Yeah.
Sadly, we do still use them a lot, even for this endeavor. And I'll say there are a lot of people who are identifying themselves as Bitcoiners on LinkedIn. There's, again, some of our approach of hopefully bringing talented operators, experts from other spaces and convincing them to come to Bitcoin. We're finding them on LinkedIn too. So LinkedIn is still a huge source, of course. Secondly, Twitter. I mean, Twitter and growingly Nostr as well, right? I mean, finding more conversations that we want to join and just see what's happening and talk to people and get introductions. I mean, that kind of thing happens really, really organically on those social channels as well. And also, I'd say in person. This is something where, admittedly, it had been a very infrequent kind of lever for me in previous recruiting environments. But that organic in person, your local Bitcoin meetup, going to the larger Bitcoin conferences, again, networking through there. To be clear, you can do this to find your own job without our service, and we love that that's available and accessible, right? But us as a business wanting to leverage those kind of organic in-person meetups, if you will, to grow our reach and to find the right candidate, that's a hugely valuable thing too. So those three, LinkedIn being the biggest one, other social channels, Twitter, Nostr, et cetera, and then in person, with those collectively, plus the inbound, of course, plus the applications, it's able to help us to build pretty robust talent maps for each and every search that we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to give some examples here, so when we initially started out in late 2022, we had this thesis that this is very much needed in this space. So what I did is I just kind of reached out to some people in my network and even some cold DMs on Twitter, and I just said, hey, do you need any help with recruiting, anything related to that? And the response has been amazing, to be honest. So those initial people, me and Andy probably took, I'd say 10 to 15 calls with different companies. And even if they didn't need the services right now, they were like, oh, we definitely need this right now, or sorry, in the future. And we would love to work with you in the future. So validating the thesis right away by reaching out to initial connections, some cold DMs. And then more recently, we're thinking of it, as our co-founder puts it, Michael, as an art rather than a science. So we made a list of like, what are the top Bitcoin companies, most reputable brands? Yeah, we want to work with. So we put them on a list, and then we're just strategically going through, okay, who do we know within these companies? And if not, how can we get to them? So right now we're going through that process, and it's going amazingly well. Like, I did not expect it to go so well. So lots of inbound because there aren't really competitors in the space right now, but we're hoping this initial client base we have will build a big enough moat that'd be really hard to compete with us, because we're building up that brand too.
Yeah, it makes sense that it would, for sure. It's a massive advantage to be the first. Have you placed anyone yet? Is it too soon to ask that question?
Yeah, we have.
Yeah. And what's that? What was the first one like? I mean, it's got to be satisfying, I guess.
It is, yeah. I mean, no, you're right.
You've been through it a million times.
Take a break, take a step back for us as a team. Yeah, celebrate that. But the first is not the win, if you will. It's the first is the beginning, and so it's again absolutely deserving of a little like reflection for us, for what we built so quickly right over the past couple weeks and months, getting clients on board, active engagements, contracts signed, and now a candidate place. Like that's a huge win. We're super excited for that. But again, it's only the beginning. And even with that one client, I'll say, like, that's still the beginning with them. There's lots more work to do. There's lots more opportunity for us to continue to prove our value. So yeah, I mean, we're focused on the future, focused on moving ahead. But yeah, we're happy to at least have crossed that threshold, right?
Right. How long does the process usually take?
It does depend on the role. I mean, I would love to give you an exact answer here, and this is a common client question that comes up. And so what I typically say, it's like, obviously there's something to be said for the level of the role, the nuance, right? A VP of engineer versus, a more entry-level role. Like, there's going to be, a difference in time to fill, if you will. The other thing is really what's our process. So making sure we're buttoned up on that. And again, to the extent we can always ensure a client has this identified and outlined before we even go to market, that helps us to save time, because we're not getting into the process and saying, oh, okay, now what? Who talks with him next? Who talks with her next? Et cetera, right? Yeah, those are things that we need to have buttoned up. But generally what I like to say is, the winning candidate, if you will, we're usually able to get introduced into the process in the first like 4 weeks, 6 weeks, maybe at most. And so from that point, it's like, how long can we, or how long will it take us to efficiently push that person and other candidates, through the assessment process to feel confident in our final decision? That's where things can, get bogged down, depending on a number of other reasons. But yeah, assuming we have the right process, then it should be pretty quick and efficient.
Now, are you guys committed to only working with Bitcoin only companies, or what's the criteria here? Because I mean, obviously there's going to be a massive dangling carrot for shitcoin. Should we see another, shitcoin pump like we've seen a few times in the past? And there's so many Web3 and blockchain and blah, blah, blah sort of companies out there. And usually they have a lot of money to throw around, and that's very enticing. So what's the strategy or the parameters here for who you're going to be trying to attract as clients?
Yeah, we will see that. We will see another shitcoin pump. Of course we will. We'll see. I mean, so it was ICOs, it was DeFis, NFTs, that like the next iteration of that will exist in the next cycle too. I don't know what it's going to be, right? But it'll be there, right? So those things will continue. I think it's on us to stay true to our mission from day one, right? And I think, honestly, looking at where we are in the bear market, we're kind of already proven that to be true. I mean, I know a lot of people who've gone that route, from my former, jobs and former life, right? The money today is there. There are tons of VC-backed opportunities, Web3 companies, different chains, L2s, L3s, L4, however fucking high up they want to go, right? So there are tons of opportunities, tons of money, tons of hiring, and there are tons of firms already doing that too. There are a lot of people who have everyone makes their own decisions for their own reasons, right? But there's been obviously a gravitation towards that, and those companies are doing well. No knocking them. They're doing very well financially right now. It's just not what we want to focus on. And low time preference thinking, again, I think we'll slowly start to absorb everything back into what we know to be true. And to the extent that we've spent the time up front through the down periods to solidify that focus that we have and that reputation we built, then I think it's going to benefit us long term.
And to expand on that too. So thinking about language, obviously we want to work with Bitcoin only companies. Now there might be some fringe cases where there are companies that primarily, work, I guess, have products or services for the Bitcoin ecosystem, but they also might shitcoin a little bit. So to take an example, let's think of like Fidelity, right? We wouldn't necessarily turn down Fidelity, but we're going to tell them, hey, we're only going to work for your roles that only promote Bitcoin. So if they want to hire an Ethereum analyst or something, we're going to say no. If you want to hire a Bitcoin analyst, yeah, we can help with that. So thinking about the language, we tend to go with Bitcoin focused, but we really are focusing on Bitcoin only. But for those fringe cases, we will expand slightly.
Yeah, I'll continue to add to that. It's, and it's not even this like moral high ground type position, hire what you want to hire, build the business you want to build, like that's everyone's prerogative. I don't want to spend the time and the energy to tell people what they shouldn't do. I just want to be here to help them with what I agree is the right thing to work on. Right. Mm-hmm. And so it just anchors in what our expertise is going to be. Like, no, we won't touch your XYZ role. It's not because that's our attitude. It's because that's just not the value we had to provide. Here's some other firms that can do that, but we've built the expertise in this one particular landscape, and that's what we want to continue to add value. And so that's how we position it, right? And then I would say part of the thesis too is that Bitcoin companies, like what are Bitcoin companies today? Like Bitcoin companies need to be Bitcoin companies because there's not enough products, there's not enough services, there's not enough like great user experience in the space. Like all these things need to be built, and so that's like the first step. But beyond that, Bitcoin, as we can get very ambiguous here, but Bitcoin is like the idea. It's going to infiltrate everything, right? And so Bitcoin companies, it's like, I think Eric, you say this sometimes, right? It's like internet companies of the 90s, the 2000s, like everything is an internet company today, or everything is a software company today, right? So that's going to kind of happen within the Bitcoin landscape too. And so there will be traditional firms. We can name several today, but there are larger companies existing today who are not founded as a Bitcoin company, but will start to operate in the landscape. And if they're approaching it in the right way, and like we truly see them, like, their light bulb has gone off and they want to add value and we believe that they're doing the right thing, then yeah, we support them too. So we don't have to draw the line there either.
Yeah. Well, kudos to you guys for taking that approach, because one, I assume at least early days, you'll have to leave a lot of money on the table, because you might just go into a pitch meeting with a company and they'll be like, look, we want to hire some Bitcoin people and we want to hire some whatever shitcoin people. Yeah. And we'd rather just work with one firm for all of it. So, you seem like nice guys, but thanks. And, as you say, I think obviously I think your thesis will be borne out in the end, and staying true to it early days will pay off greatly long-term. But, another, well, maybe this is the right way to ask the question, but would you ever pitch roles to prospective company clients? And just to put some more context in that, Perth Heat is a baseball team in Australia, and they have a chief Bitcoin officer. Yep. And he's kind of transformed the team into, a baseball team that is like infused with Bitcoin. So it's not just. Is
it Steven you're talking about? There's another guy.
There's the CEO, and then there's the chief Bitcoin officer. I'm blanking on the name right now, but it very.
Okay, I didn't know that. I know Steven.
Well, maybe. But they don't just accept Bitcoin. Like they kind of just they leverage Bitcoin in many different ways in the baseball team, and to what apparently has been great success on a number of different levels. How they pay their players and the engagement they get from audience in field, like in the ballpark and online. It's just, and this is the thesis, right? Like if Bitcoin truly is just a better way of communicating value, let's say, then integrating that into a business that deals with a product or service of value and transmitting that value to others. I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer, or at least it's going to be. Anyways, point being, would you ever approach your big multinationals and pitch them a particular role, like a chief Bitcoin officer, and say, hey, look, this is the wave of the future. I know you don't know much about it yet. I know you don't have a lot of positions for it, but we're finding that a lot of companies are hiring a chief Bitcoin officer just to play that role of seeing where Bitcoin can be a value add to their enterprise or to their business. and of course that would be like a doorway in, because once you have a chief Bitcoin officer, and if things are going well, then they need to hire all these other Bitcoin people to do all these other things. So would that ever be part of the biz dev, or do you strictly wait to be approached for specific roles, and you don't, because obviously it's somewhat delicate, but yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
It's a really interesting question. A couple immediate thoughts. I mean, what is our core business, right? A lot of the times when we have, all of us, three of us have these awesome ideas, right? But they're out there ideas, and it's like sometimes, especially early stage, let's anchor back to like what is our focus today? What is our core mission? What is our business model? What is going to drive revenue, right? To some degree. And so that has to be rooted in providing recruiting services, for clients who are actively hiring or soon to be hiring, et cetera, right? And so it's not something we've thought about in the short term, but I think it could be addressed by a lot of what we think for the medium and long term as it relates to like our educational type content, right? And this is relevant on both sides of the fence. So for candidates, again, thinking of like providing education to folks who maybe are a little bit curious, but then by learning more, then they're full on, like, I want to get a job in Bitcoin. So it's growing our talent pool. It's growing the supply side, if you will, right? So that education for candidates is valuable, but education for companies can be repackaged as like onboarding material for, let's say, traditional companies who are now hiring Bitcoiners. It could be like, re-leveraging of existing workforces internally to now be Bitcoin focused teams. So like there's a lot of like revenue driving opportunities for education in the corporate landscape. This could be an interesting part of that, right? So more like proactive evangelism type work, right? Where we see an opportunity for a business perhaps before they've come to this realization, right? And I mean, yeah, who knows if it's going to be well received or not, but like, to ask the question and to try and leverage our networks that we built over that time to like get in with leadership teams of exciting companies who are not yet Bitcoin companies. Sure. I love the idea. Maybe, John, we can talk about this, moving forward, but it's something that I think, to the extent we're like growing the space in all ways, right? Yeah. Right. If that's like our more overarching mission statement, then that should certainly fall within it. How can we do that?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a little bit of wishful thinking from my perspective on that, and knowing how bureaucracies work, because again, from our perspective, we might just think, if you're a big company, why not pay someone $100,000 a year to just be that person to see if there's anything that Bitcoin, what relationship or what could Bitcoin do for the business? But of course, we know how bureaucracies work, and they don't often think like that way, and they're kind of sluggish, and they're resistant to new and novel things, especially as foreign and how much of a paradigm shift Bitcoin represents. It's, as we all know, it's kind of off or on sort of realization. Like you just you don't see it until you do, and then then it's kind of all encompassing. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that's too far fetched to if I'm not, if the wishful thinking is at all accurate, why wouldn't there be demand for people just saying, like, just in case, have someone there to be proficient in assessing our business and be knowledgeable enough in the Bitcoin space to say, where are the synergies here? And is that worth $100,000 a year? I mean, depends on the business, I suppose, but I think the answer will be yes for a lot of people.
Yeah. Or even offering it as a part of like an advisory service, right? With our advisory network, with our team that's already been built, like, how can we collectively, land in a company and help build out certain things related to their, Bitcoin adoption, right? It could be more mining focused, could be more like media focused, et cetera, right? But within the advisory network that we have, like, that could be an interesting thing to provide to companies on like a project type basis. And then if they want to hire that person moving forward, there's another opportunity there to find someone to steward that program moving forward for the long run.
Yeah. We touched on earlier, these kind of other value adds that you were considering. And I know obviously early days, you just focus on the main thing and get that rolling. But what are, in addition to what you just referenced, what are some of the things that you see this flourishing into as the space matures and there's more demand from companies, more spaces to fill? I think there'll always be a pretty robust demand for, on the prospect side.
To jump in real quick. So what I've experienced working at a Bitcoin company myself and noticing how the ecosystem operates right now, it's a lot of startups. And I don't think startups have the onboarding processes and I guess check-ins to really develop one's career. So speaking to myself, I just turned 27. I'm relatively young in my career. I had to kind of plan out my own goals and ask for that guidance within my role. So how can we build out onboarding systems that exist in traditional fiat companies that also tie into Bitcoin too, and develop one's career? So we mentioned internships before. So if someone coming straight out of college gets a job within a Bitcoin company, how do we develop this person? So that's one thing we're definitely thinking about. And then I guess on the candidate side of things, thinking about providing extra education, resources, that kind of stuff. Like, how do we help you transition out of your fiat career into Bitcoin? And I think there's a lot to be built around that as well.
Yeah, there's so many ideas, and I think as we try to like distill them amongst the three of us, right, internally, and organize our thoughts, I think they all end up falling within those two buckets. So it's education/content, right, and advisory, right. And so a lot of the things that we can come up, a lot of the ideas will probably fall within those buckets, just to simplify it, to make it easier to plan for the future. But even off the top of our head within that, everything Erica just shared, on the educational front on both sides. I also think of it from my lens, being almost 10 years Eric senior, how would I have liked to have shortened my journey to Bitcoin, right? It took me too long, perhaps, right? So how can we provide those kinds of things for folks to get here faster and not make mistakes along the way, kind of thing. The advisory stuff, everything we've discussed, helping a company to transition to, implementing their Bitcoin strategy, if you will, which again sounds silly because, like, again, companies 10, 20 years ago, like, what's our internet strategy? It's just that strategy moving forward, right? So we know that companies will be wanting to do this eventually. So a lot of that could fall under there. I mean, on the internship side, I have these dreams of like building out feeder type programs, but actually building like genuine and embedded type relationships with top universities, across not just the US, but globally. I think a big thing for me that we haven't talked a lot about today is this global lens. Like, Bitcoin is not an American phenomenon, or North American phenomenon even. There's so many ways, and to the extent that people can like already pull themselves out of that like US focused lens of how to view Bitcoin, like, we can go way deep down this rabbit hole. It's not a political thing, right? It's just not an American thing in general. There are so many ways that it's being leveraged across the globe and unique to those individual circumstances, right? So I also want to see Bitcoin companies be founded in different corners of the globe. I want to see Bitcoiners coming from different parts of the globe and getting opportunities, and not having their particular geographical location be a hindrance to getting into the space too. So, very broad and ambiguous there, but to the extent that we can, create opportunity, extend opportunity, globally, that's something I would like to see us kind of accomplish as well.
And can you service clients on the prospect and the company side globally at the moment?
We can, yeah. I mean, it's important to note we have recruiting coverage, boots on the ground in Europe today. So, with us in the U.S. covering all the Americas, U.S., Central, South America, and then from Europe through Africa, we do have that coverage. Don't have anyone sitting in Asia today, but obviously that would be on the roadmap for us too.
Do you accept Bitcoin?
Absolutely.
Prefer, actually.
Absolutely.
Because you can see. And that's one of the things that's so cool about what's happening with Lightning and all the stuff that's popping up around it. A good example, and I'm not too familiar with it, but do you guys know Stackwork, Paul Etoy?
We do. Yeah, we do.
And so I don't know how it's evolved since I spoke to him like over a year ago now. But the premise was, if someone has a cell phone, they can do some, digital work, rather basic. So you don't need that many qualifications. But you can, when you have the time, you can log in, you can do this work, whether it's, identifying stuff for AI or whatever the task may be, translations. You do it for a few hours, maybe you make $3, $4, $5 an hour, whatever it is. It's paid in Bitcoin. You don't need, you don't need anything else. No other infrastructure required. That's the work. That's the payment. Done. No friction. You don't need bank accounts. You don't need IDs. You don't need employment contracts, nothing. That's it. And, I mean, that's part of the dream, right? Of this flourishing, frictionless exchange of value and work being done, is that you don't need all these fiat encumbrances like your bank accounts and like your IDs and like your employment contracts. Now, some of those, given the context, will still be used for a while. But I love the idea of just being able to work and be compensated for that and not have noise in between. And in that environment, I presume the services that you guys provide will still be valuable. Maybe they'll be delivered in a slightly different way, and some things will be different about it. But how do you guys see a more hyper Bitcoinized future in this sort of business?
I think jump in real quick. I think since COVID, we've seen obviously that transition to remote work, And me, myself, I moved across country from Pennsylvania. I'm in Utah right now because I work strictly from a laptop. So as long as you have an internet connection or a mobile phone, now you can work from wherever you want. Tie in now a Lightning mobile wallet or a Bitcoin address, and you can get paid anywhere in the world. Now it's still up to you, whatever jurisdiction you're in, make sure you report your income or follow the laws from that jurisdiction. But now this marketplace is open to the entire world. How do we tap into the talent in Africa or in Asia that traditional American companies kind of been ignoring in a way? So being Bitcoin Talent Co. being a light to help that workforce really shine and onboard them to this remote work ecosystem, I think it's going to be really really valuable here in the very near future.
Yeah, Paul's a great example of this, where Paul's obviously a Bitcoiner, through and through. Yeah, but Stackwork, I definitely not speaking from. I'd love to hear how he thinks about this, but I wouldn't say Stackwork is a Bitcoin company, and that the platform itself, the AI kind of generated human element on the back end. It's and operating in the same space as the revs, the assemblies, but their differentiator and why they will be more successful than those other players is because they're leveraging a Bitcoin kind of behind the scenes, right, to process payments, to essentially open up the supply side of their equation to allow more workers on the platform to service these micro tasks, right? It's phenomenal how opening that access from a payment standpoint has allowed them to drive prices down, things like that. So leveraging a Bitcoin behind the scenes is kind of that thesis we talked about earlier, where other companies, maybe their product on the face is not Bitcoin, but they're going to have to leverage Bitcoin in some way, right? So we will see a lot more of that. Now thinking of that in our own setting, I mean, I just look up and down. As small as it is today, we still have like a tech stack, if you will. I mean, everything that we do in a recruiting, standpoint of like LinkedIn, we talked about it. God, if we can, have a new LinkedIn, that'd be great. But LinkedIn, everything we use for our contracts, for our banking, for our invoicing, for billing, for holding, funds, all the way down the stack, our ATS, like our candidate focused CRM, all these things. If there's a Bitcoin version, if you will, that would be exciting. And we're starting to see that. Obviously we can look at companies like OpenNode. We can look at companies like Levelfield, obviously really exciting, kind of their big announcement recently with, I guess, becoming the first legitimate bank, right? Like actual banking charter, but focused on Bitcoin. So
is that the Wences thing in Gibraltar?
No, here in the States, I can't think of the whole founding team, but we know Lisa from Levelfield, from Levelfield Financial, based out of Houston, I think it is, right? Yeah. And so I'm probably butchering, but as I understand it, they have gone the opposite direction, like starting as a bank, like a legitimate bank, FDI insured bank, right? They bought an existing bank, but they're obviously a Bitcoin company and helping people to easily transfer from fiat to Bitcoin, et cetera, have like more all-encompassing Bitcoin banking features in a more traditional setting, maybe more easily adopted setting for people who aren't already Bitcoiners themselves. We as a business operating in Bitcoin obviously want to have our like fiat dollars for now with an institution like that. All right. So we're starting to see this. Like it's not like we're dreaming of the future. These things are happening. There are companies that can help with with invoicing, that can help with contracts and things like that. But I want to see that continue to move forward and operate in this, hyper Bitcoinized world that you're referring to, right? Where like everything we do is the Bitcoin version, if you will. But again, I think it's silly to say that because the Bitcoin versions we're talking about ultimately, I think, just become the standards, right? Once we kind of fully come full circle, where it's like, it's not our Bitcoin strategy. We're not a Bitcoin company. We're just a company. Everyone uses Bitcoin now, right? Yeah.
And I think the first to integrate Bitcoin for that reason will have a tremendous advantage over, the laggards, let's say. You mentioned the kind of your tech stack is basic, let's say. Do you guys see, the software is eating the world sort of statement, right? Like it's coming for everything. And do you guys see a future where you're more of a software company? And I'll share an anecdote with you. When I was living in China, I think in 2014, 16, something like that, I interviewed an entrepreneur at a startup. And I think there may have been some so-called AI element, but, back then it was probably fairly basic. But anyways, the punchline is that the companies, at least for some, because this won't apply to certain positions, but for some of the positions they were looking to fill, they would go to the companies that they were working with, and they would have their top people in whatever category, fill out some kind of a test or a gamified aptitude, something, to try to, and this whole process is highly dependent on how good those tests are, because what are you actually teasing out? But once they would get that data, then they had, use social media and their networks and gamification to basically blast those same tests out to like the WeChat verse, let's say. So like if you were some kid, in high school in Chengdu, or, you were a 22-year-old working at a restaurant in Chongqing or something like that, you could play this game and submit it. And based on where you lined up in reference to the top performers in this client company, you might get brought into the fold. You might get a follow-up, test or a follow-up email and say, hey, here's another one, or, we'd like to talk to you or something like that. Now, of course, you can imagine with Bitcoin how all this is even more gamified, because you'd have that value layer and you could actually pay people to pay the test. And as they incrementally got further along, they get more per test and all that kind of stuff. But punchline just being, that's obviously a way that company was leveraging software and technology to dramatically expand the net of their prospective, clients they were working with in order to find placements for their corporate clients.
Yeah.
And you cast a wider net, you're going to have a greater chance of having talented prospects, and that benefits the client companies. So again, I know we're like getting way ahead of ourselves here because you started a month ago, but do you see that as a natural evolution of this service, that it's going to become, maybe there'll always be a face-to-face, shake your hand element of the business, creating relationships, of course, but will you necessarily have to kind of become more of a software company? Because I presume there will be entrants into the space that take a far more software-centric approach, and who knows how effective they will be and how that will change the dynamics of competition in the space. So how are you guys looking at that?
Yeah, a couple of things I would say. I don't think that a recruiting firm, in the kind of model that we have, or many other companies that in that, like filling recruiting roles, right, don't have to evolve to software companies to survive. But I think the ones that will last the longest, that will compete, strongly in a increasingly digitized world. I mean, we're already in the most digital world, right? But this is always going to continue with AI. That we can leverage those types of tools to make our job more efficient. That's probably like the middle ground you would wind up in, right? And we can also look at it this way, like maybe, like I said, the chip on my shoulder, the lens of like, always haven't been a recruiter, and the conversation that's been ongoing in my space for 10 plus years now, like, will recruiters be out of jobs? Will AI take all of our roles? Like, some of them, yeah, a lot of them, yeah. I honestly, yeah. I mean, you have to be able to recognize this to protect yourself from that kind of future, right? But I do ultimately come back to the feeling that it's like recruiters who know how to use these tools will be the ones who survive, not like all recruiters are going away. And especially as it relates to like, the more shake your hand, look eye to eye, like if you're helping an executive level candidate transition, from one role to the next, and making a big career change, a big change for their families, for their lives. Like there's a lot of things that go into a job change that are beyond just like an AI matching type system, right? And so the negotiation of compensation, the step-by-step building of trust and a rapport that allows someone to even get comfortable enough to like make that final decision. Like those are the things that I think will still require some human elements, and we'll have to do that. We will have to provide that. We will want to provide that service, right? But we also look at it like, okay, well, what's scalable? How can we continue to grow? How can we provide as much value? And certainly we'll see software continue to eat more into like, the research, the competencies matching, even the assessment to some degree can all start to be automated. And if it supports our business, helps us to be more efficient and grow, then absolutely want to leverage that. Always open to building the right things internally, or looking for the right types of software tools and partners to leverage to give us a competitive advantage. That's just always going to be like my way of operating. But I don't know if we would become a software company. It's an interesting kind of like specification. Like when you cross that threshold, when you no longer a services company and now like truly a SaaS model with only recurring revenue. Like, would that be our only revenue structure? Hard to say 100%, but we probably always have a little bit of a hybrid. Yeah.
Let me ask if this would fall into your kind of parameters for who you do business with, or what type of business do you do? And this is, kind of a playful question, but I can see a future where people will preferentially want to hire Bitcoiners, even if it's not for, like a Bitcoin role, let's say. So like, just a very rudimentary example. If I was hiring a plumber and there was 5 available and I knew one was a Bitcoiner, I want to hire the Bitcoiner plumber. All else being equal, of course, and that's never the case. So there's a lot of nuance here. But I guess the question is just that, would that help I know you're not like a platform for odd jobs or anything like that, but if there was sufficient demand, just people want to hire Bitcoiners, you have this big, pot of Bitcoin people.
Yeah.
Yes, you have a lot of different criteria associated with that, but I don't know. Do you see anything in the future where, that in itself
Super
is a resource? Because you could facilitate that. And I think there'll be some demand for it, at least from Bitcoiners.
For sure. For sure. I agree. And you admitted this. You're exactly right. That's a different service. That's not a recruiting platform, right? That's not a recruiting like firm, if you will. That is if we're looking at like the getting everything verticalized like Bitcoin only, it's like the Bitcoin version of a TaskRabbit, if you will, or something like that.
Yeah.
And that should exist. Again, that's a whole nother business. It's a whole nother set of challenges, but I would love to see that. If anyone has that idea, talk to us. Maybe we can work together on it. I think it's a great idea. But I think the last point I'll make to that is it raises an interesting kind of question, because as we talk through what we're doing, we do, unfortunately, kind of get focused on this, like, knowledge workers or professional or like corporate type environments. Like, yes, that is kind of what we focus on, because that's what the types of companies we're working on need for their roles. But that's not to say that's the only important thing in the landscape, right? Like there was, I'll say it directly. I think there was an exchange recently, Eric, right? Blue Collar Bitcoin. I think that they're doing a lot of awesome stuff. And the person who owns the account, I don't, if you want to reach out, I'd love to talk to you about this. I don't know who personally runs the account, but there was a notion of like, not everyone needs to get a job in Bitcoin. He's right. He or she's right. 100%. I actually love that, because it brings up an interesting debate where we are focusing on a very particular corner of the ecosystem, but we by no means intend to say that this is the only thing that's important, right? There's a lot of opportunity here. This is the background I come from, again, for better or worse. This is where I can provide value, but there's other areas where the Bitcoin ecosystem can grow, just because people are paying their electrician in Bitcoin now. They're paying their plumber, or they're building other companies, based on their other kind of skill sets, right? That are outside of like the tech landscape. That needs to happen. I want to see that to happen. I unfortunately don't have as much expertise in that landscape, but yeah, like I'd love to do what we can to facilitate growth in those areas too.
I think there's something to hiring Bitcoiners overall. Going back to where we started out, that integrity part, the values that Bitcoiners share. I think if you staff your business, if it's a traditional fiat business, let's just say it's a landscaping company, like anything, you hire Bitcoiners, there's a really good chance you're gonna do very well.
Landscaping company.
Yeah, carving bees into the hedges. No, but yeah, there's everyone I've worked with so far in this space. Not everyone, but most Bitcoiners are mission driven. They have a reason to work, and I think a lot of people, like especially my age, have that high time preference thinking. So employing people that have more low time preference thinking, a little more business oriented. Because if they put in the work to study Bitcoin, that means I would say that they're probably a little bit smarter on the scale of knowledgeable workers. So yeah, employing Bitcoiners is a great benefit to your business, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with the sentiment that not everybody has to work for a Bitcoin business, and a lot of people, if they have existing skills and existing career, like, and they become Bitcoiners. I mean, as you said, just receiving Bitcoin for payment for your services is awesome as well. And I'm sure a lot of people will be content with that. But as I'm sure we're all aware, you find yourself in clown world in 2023, and this thing in Bitcoin emerges as being so meaningful to you for a number of different reasons, not least of which is you see it as a potential solution to rectify some of that clown worldiness. And consumes your thinking, and you want to contribute to it in some way. You want to bring its value into your own life as well. There's always a selfish component of that. And I think for that reason, people just recognize how much better their experience of work would be if they were with a Bitcoin company, how much more energized, how much more enthusiastic. I mean, I'm sure we've all been in roles that are literally like, I mean, we use the term soul destroying. That's like pervasive when you're in a shitty job. Like that's just investigate that term. It's so horrible, right? Like you're in this thing where every single day you're grinding it out, and you just like big sighs. When you get up, you're not excited. You hate the
Monday
work.
morning.
You hate yourself for doing the work. Like it's just horrible. Versus knowing that you still got to get up, you still got to put your boots on, you still got to have some discipline and routine and all that kind of stuff, but you get to contribute to something that one is bigger than yourself and you find so meaningful. And that flips it to the opposite thing. It makes it like soul expanding, let's say. And then of course, that if you play your cards right, and if you can find the value that you have and continue to refine it, extract it, express it, and plug it in somewhere, then more value will literally flow in the sense of, streaming payments in the future. And now to some extent to you. And so you're getting the best of both worlds. And I think naturally, a lot of people look at that and be like, I want some of that. I want to wake up and have that feeling. Not that there won't be tough days, not that there won't be challenging circumstances and all that kind of stuff. But if you've got to wake up and deploy your labor to, feed yourself, put a roof over your head, and fulfill whatever ambitions you might have, why would you not want to do it in service of the thing that you find most meaningful? Whether that's Bitcoin or fucking whatever it is, obviously a lot of people are really into their given field for that very reason, because it's meaningful. But a hell of a lot more are just, they become soulless NPCs because they spent 40 years doing something that is meaningless to them. They hate, they don't like the people that, they're around with, and they just put on this mask to get them through the day. And you come home, you take off the mask, and substance abuse and depression, like all that crazy shit that we know. And the result is clown world. And so I think it's just a recognition that if you're going to be an element of a solution of turning things around and cultivating a better individual, family, society, you need to be doing something that's going to force you, or inspire you rather, to extract the best from you and put that out there. And so, that's why you got 1,000+ people hitting you up being like, fuck, place me as soon as possible. I need to get out of this shit.
I would say, anecdotally speaking, for myself, that's exactly the feeling I had. So my engineering job, it was the worst. I had the Sunday scaries. I had the Sunday scaries every single day of the week. I did not want to go to work. I forced myself to go there because I needed to get a paycheck. And then that translated into other issues, like you mentioned, substance abuse. Like I was just like, I want to get home and smoke some weed because I don't want to think about work anymore. Like I don't want to think about this world. I had to go into the office the next day. So transition to a Bitcoin company now. I think it's important to know you spend, let's just say 8 hours a day with your coworkers, right? Wouldn't you want to spend like a third of your life with people that you like to be around and talk to and share the same values as you?
Yeah.
So whether it be in a Bitcoin company or a traditional fiat company with other Bitcoiners in it, just being around other Bitcoiners makes work so much better. And I've experienced that at Bitcoin Magazine, experienced it now working with Andy and Michael. It's such a different feeling. And now I get up every day. I love working because there's this part of me that I know I have a bigger purpose. It's not just collecting that paycheck.
And I'm sure you feel like you can be yourself more, because you go to that fiat job, and for all the reasons, you hate the work and all that kind of stuff. As you mentioned with your colleagues, you may not line up, on values certainly as well as you might with Bitcoiners. But then everything becomes so kind of artificial, right? Well, there's certain things I can't talk about. Let's not have the political or the religious or the whatever conversations.
Yep.
And, the small talk is, whatever bullshit is in the legacy media at the moment, or the sports ball stuff. And I hate to be too disparaging of that kind of stuff because there's a place for it. But when it's like, when it's all there is on offer with the people that you're spending, as you said, eight hours a day with, it's just another element that grinds you down. And you're like, I'm a shell of myself. I'm not able to really, step into who I think I am and or can be. And that's a horrible way to live. And that's a horrible thing to subject yourself to. And it's amazing that, there's many amazing things about Bitcoin, but one of them is that by virtue of it developing in the way that it is, it's providing so many people, not just the financial freedom and that kind of opportunity, but the opportunity to engage what they have to offer to the world in like a manner that is basically unprecedented, in a manner that they get to do it with the people that they want to do it with, in the way they want to do it, and they naturally, it's not like the companies have, again, being a little idealistic here, but I think it's broadly true. The companies don't have to crack the whip as hard because those individuals all are inspired to improve themselves, refine themselves. They're ambitious for themselves and for the work they're doing. And so everything just seems more natural, and you get, a flourishing basically. And it's amazing to see. And I'm almost envious of you guys, because you're going to be interacting with so many candidates who have that like pent up desire for that. And so you're going to interact with it on that way. And then of course you're going to be interacting with companies who have already filled themselves largely with those sorts of people and that kind of energy. And so when you have those meetings with both, I mean, I think it's going to be, well, Andy, particularly for you, probably far more enjoyable than those that you experienced in your prior career.
Yeah. And I love the, just like how diverse all these conversations have already been so far. And I'm learning myself over time, like what hyper-Bitcoinization means. We all have our ideas, obviously it's increased adoption, everyone's using it, right? But I increasingly think like hyper-Bitcoinization is
like?
It's everyone finally finding what Bitcoin means to them, right? And there will still need to be differences across countries, neighbors, things like that. But to finally reach a certain threshold where like foundationally we all understand Bitcoin and believe that it's better for the world. Like part of that does, like to be clear, like reaching this foundation does do away with a lot of the mess, the trash today, but it still leaves room for like, I mean, heaven forbid, a Bitcoiner who's a vegan, right? Or a Bitcoiner who loves baseball. Like these things will still happen. That's okay. It doesn't mean you're not a Bitcoiner, right? Like, yes, I love steak, but I also like to drink a beer and I do watch sports on occasion. So like, do I fit into the mold? Maybe to some people, no, right? But I think that needs to happen.
That's part of the fascinating unifying aspect. And again, I mean, this is when you talk about something that's so meaningful and so unifying, and I explore this a lot on my podcast, you wind up in deeply philosophical or theological sort of domains, and you look for parallels there, because it seems what's happening is if you line up on some of the paramount or prime values or principles, then all the differences, become irrelevant, if not enjoyable for the diversity that it can generate, right? And so and I think that's evident in Bitcoin. Like, yes, there's, you have your purity tests and that kind of stuff, and which I totally appreciate, because you may end up choosing, well, you'll end up choosing what you choose, but it's nice to see a vigorous discourse around a given issue so that you're informed and you can make more informed decisions on that kind of stuff. But, to my impression, or what I've observed, is there's a lot of different sort of people in Bitcoin, and we're all a little weird and in many different ways, but because we've converged on the values that we perceive are embedded within Bitcoin and what we perceive to be their potential implications or benefits out in the world, should they, persist and propagate, that is sufficient to allow us to be to each other to be themselves, basically. And so you have this really, fascinating or great convergence of both shared values and, appreciative of diverse interests and diversity generally. And I think that's, I think we'd all agree is that's what produces probably the most harmonious, flourishing, prosperous sort of, community, society, country, citadel, whatever.
What is sovereignty? It's, the ability to be an individual, right?
Right.
Individuals are individual. There's a lot. I mean, this is a whole other podcast, I know, John, but yeah, I love this topic. I love this conversation because I don't think anyone has the answer, nor will there ever be a single answer. It's just, let's all finally agree that like Bitcoin, across the board helps to get us to a better place. But beyond that, like what other things can we, accomplish as humankind, right? I mean, there's a lot of exciting things we can talk about on that front.
Totally. Well, gents, if we're not going to crack into that rabbit hole, was there anything else that you guys wanted to address or discuss before we shut it down today?
No, I just, again, appreciate you giving us the time, giving us the platform here. I mean, obviously, selfishly, we'll have to continue to plug. If you're interested in finding a job, please visit us, bitcointalent.co. There's our general application. Again, we are, to the best of our ability, still going through those applications. Obviously, we'd love to connect as many of you as possible with open opportunities, but we'll continue to focus on driving the client side of the fence now. And again, companies that are hiring in the space, also come to us. We're here to help.
Can I just ask before we do our final sign-offs, for all those people that share what we just said and really want to work in Bitcoin, is there anything that you guys can tell them in terms of what puts them on the right path in terms of engaging with you, making themselves attractive to companies, like anything they can do beyond? Because most people are like, well, I put a resume somewhere or whatever. Like what can an individual do to enhance their chances of being attractive to you, the companies you work with, that kind of stuff?
Eric's the expert here.
This is my favorite thing to talk about, because this is exactly what I did. And it all comes back to what's called a proof of work project. So in Bitcoin, proof of work means going and doing something in the world, providing value and putting it out on social media, really, like showing people what you're doing. And from that, over time, more and more people take notice of what you're up to. And if you're contributing to the Bitcoin ecosystem, that's a huge plus. It's knocking out two birds in one stone, really. You're contributing to the Bitcoin ecosystem and you're contributing to your resume in a way. So like one thing I did, I helped Breedlove put on an event in 2021 and 2022. When I applied to Bitcoin Magazine, that's the first thing I put on my resume. And I would say that definitely helped me land my first interview and successfully land the job. So if you want to get in the Bitcoin space, I would say start now. Start what I call a proof of work project, podcast, an email newsletter. Start learning how to code and contribute to some kind of Bitcoin project in any way you can. Help build on Noster, anything related to Bitcoin. Just start building, putting yourself out there and showing your progress. Every tiny little milestone, put that on Twitter. Say, hey, I just did this today. It helped Bitcoin in this way. I helped this Bitcoiner get a job, whatever it may be. And like I said, over time, people will take notice and those opportunities will start coming to you. And even if they don't, now you have something additional to put in your resume, which will make you stand out. Because if I had to choose between someone that contributed to Bitcoin for the last year in some proof of work project way or someone that didn't with everything else the same, I'm going to choose the guy that has shown that work.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And the only thing I'd add to it from my perspective is don't ask for anything for it, initially. And this kind of goes back to what you're saying that you may integrate in the future, which is like these apprentice programs or something like that. Because I can imagine a ton of people. I mean, if you're an orange-pilled high school kid, college kid, and you're just like, there is nothing else for me but working in a Bitcoin company, save up your money, summer jobs, whatever, and work for 6 months or 12 months for free in a Bitcoin company. Yeah, it'll suck, and you'll be poor and all that kind of jazz, but maybe it gets your foot in the door and it turns into an amazing career. At a minimum, now some people know who you are. Now you've made connections, your network is growing. And I think the same is true for what you just said. It's like, absolutely, do something that showcases what you're interested in or what some of your talents are. And don't be hasty or don't try to get something for it initially. What you're getting is you're broadening your network and people are becoming familiar with you, and maybe you're making some contacts. Because if it just seems like maybe not too many, but if you come out of the gates and you're looking to be compensated for work in a space where there's a ton of people making work for free and there's a lot of really smart people doing a lot of really great things, it's probably not going to generate the results that you're looking for. But if you just, as you said, kind of do it as a way to put yourself out there, but also to express that you're willing to sacrifice for the cause, basically for the mission. I'm willing to contribute in some way. That's a selfless contribution, let's say. And I think that's the thing that gets people's ears to perk up and say, oh, wow, like this person is down for the cause. Maybe they're of interest to me. So I totally agree with that advice.
It's the networking piece is the core of that, right? Showing what you're doing, reaching out to get advice or help. How can I be helpful in return? So it's just growing your own network. The one thing I would say to counter some of that was just I would encourage companies not to weaponize the concept of proof of work too, right? Because it's sometimes I see this notion that Bitcoiners are frugal, ergo cheap, right? Frugal is good, cheap is not, right? Bitcoiners are value driven. And I think that's an important kind of like distinction you can continue to make. So maybe just like standing up for the little guy, little man, like
I totally agree. But I think the funny part is that if you offer that, you show up at whatever company, be like, look, I'll work for a year for free. After a month, they'll be like, we'll pay you. or after like a little while, if they see any value in it at all, they're not going to, just juice you for a year. They'll be like, look, we'll put you on salary for something. Because I obviously totally agree with that sentiment. Well, gents, thanks for coming on and having a chat today. And I'm super excited for what lays ahead for you guys. I think it's going to be very successful, and I look forward to seeing it develop.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
Thank you so much, John. Really appreciate you.
All right, guys. Take care.
Bye.
Yeah.